This is Careers in New Media with Douglas E. Welch. For more information, visit the website douglasewelch.com/new media. This presentation was part of the ELearning Guild's Online Forums 2010. For more information, visit elearningguild.com.
This is session number 601, Making the Case for Using Media for E-Learning. In this session you will learn why new media and why now, how audio and video enhance the learning experience, how you can sell new media to your management, how your learners can best be served by delivering information via media. Our presenter today is Douglas Welch. He's an independent new media consultant for the Welch Wright Company. And his premier podcast, Career Opportunities, is now in its 5th year of weekly public production. He is a pioneer podcaster and computer consultant. Douglas consults on a variety of technology subjects in the Los Angeles area, teaches podcasting and new media for writers at UCLA Extension, and was on the staff of the 2006 Stevens College Summer Film Workshop in Columbia, Missouri, teaching new filmmakers how to promote and distribute their work using new media. I'm happy to turn things over now to Douglas. Please go ahead and begin when you see your first slide.
Hello, everyone, and like a bad Verizon commercial, I'm going to ask everyone, can you hear me now? If you could, just in your chat or using your agree button, just make sure that everyone can hear. I feel that now we'll move into a romper room reference. We'll say, I see Jeff and Karen and Kathy and Gail. Okay, and Heinrich. So it looks like everyone can hear me pretty well. Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Looking back over the agenda for the last 2 days here in the online forums, it looks like they've been just burying you in how to do this, how to podcast, how to record, how to use your some great sessions I've seen there listed in the schedule. Today, I'm going to focus on, in this kind of closing session, a little bit more on the why. In fact, this is what I do a lot of in my consulting, is I do somehow, I teach people how to blog and how to set up blogs and podcasts and other things. But in a lot of cases, I spend a lot of my time telling people why they should be, in fact, convincing them why they should do this. It's a tough row to hoe right now because people don't like being caught between a place where one thing is fading and another thing is growing because they don't know what's going to happen down the road. They see this period in the middle like we're in right now where we don't know what's going to happen. And frankly, that scares most of us when we don't know what's going to happen. You can see it in the entertainment industry through what the increasing of web shows and various things there, and the decline of broadcast television. The music industry with the decline of recording companies and contracts and systems. You can see it all over, and you see a lot of fear out there. So my hope and my goal through all the work I do is to try and get you over that fear if you're having it. Some of you may have already gotten over it, which I think is a great thing. I love meeting people who are taking the reins and taking all these new tools that we have available and actually putting them to use. Sometimes I sound like a bad Nike commercial in that I just say, just do it a lot. And sometimes it gets through, and sometimes you really have to handhold people through the process and give them as much ammunition as possible to make them take the first steps on their new media journey. Well, right up front here, I'm going to hit you with a poll because I've listed on this poll a few of the typical reasons that people get held back from doing new media. Money and budget, knowledge and training, management approval, fear. If you have other things that are holding you back, please go ahead and put them in the chat because I think those are great things to share. Obviously, I can't think of all the different reasons why you may be having trouble in your specific particular company or organization from doing new media. I see Christopher says, nothing holds me back. Yes, that's exactly what we want to hear. And hopefully by the end of our time today, most of you will be feeling that as well. There really shouldn't be anything holding you back. Benefits to be had are so dramatic that we really need to push forward into this realm and take advantage of these wonderful stuff. Christopher says sometimes he needs stuff to hold. No, you don't need stuff holding you back. Trust me. Sometimes we need to let our mind run forward and see what the possibilities are. We can always pull back. We can always implement what's implementable right now, but it's always good to dream a little bit out there. I also see a few people talking about IT limitations, which is not something I put on my list, but I think I would have, considering I'm a former IT person. Karen is asking me for a little more volume here. Go a little higher. Okay, Karen, just let me know if that helps any at all. Okay, so let's look at our poll here. Knowledge and training. Well, 56%. Well, that's great because that's why you guys are here. You're here to learn as much as you can about this new media stuff. And this is where I really do a lot of my work, is helping people gain the knowledge that they need to take those first steps. So hopefully this online forum these last 2 days has been quite useful in that regard as well. Money and budget, 50%. That was totally expected on my part. Seems to be one of the big problems with new media is money. But in reality, and we're going to talk about a little bit of this in my presentation, that should be one of your least issues, because wonderful thing about the new media tools today is they are cheap, if not free. Yes, there is time to be had, but the fact is the products themselves are cheap to free, and that's where you want to start. Lita chimes in from the chat that analysis paralysis is another obstacle. Ugh, we all deal with analysis paralysis. I am, even as an IT person, I'm one of the people who often has trouble buying products because there's just such a plethora of products out there. And so I know exactly what you're coming from. And hopefully today we'll push you through that a little bit and at least get you some methods where you can break through that paralysis by trying a few of the things that are out there. First of all, why new media? Why now? This is a little quote of mine that I tend to trot out when I'm talking to people all the time. Never before have we had such a wide variety of educational tools at our disposal so inexpensively and so widely. That is so true. The stuff we can do today with our computers, with our cell phones. I have an iPhone here sitting next to me, a new iPhone 4, which I'm just really digging into the features of. We have the flip cam. We have all these tools. It would have cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars in the past to do what we can do today with a cell phone, with our laptop, with our desktop computers. To me, this is amazing. My wife's grandfather passed away at the age of 98. He was born, I believe, in 1889, I believe. And when I look back at what he saw over the course of his lifetime, he was born in a rural mountain village in the middle of the island of Sicily, where donkeys were the main mode of transportation. By the time he passed away, he had seen the space shuttle and the beginnings of the internet. I often look back at myself and say, are we going to see that dramatic of a change in my lifetime? And the fact is, in new media, we're already seeing those dramatic changes. The internet has fundamentally changed the way we live our life. And we're already starting to see those types of dramatic changes. And in fact, every generation does. So remember that the next time you're facing new media issues. Imagine what it would have taken for you to be able to do what you do today with Captivate and other products like that. The fact is, you couldn't have done them. There was no online education. There was correspondence courses, which is about the closest you can come, but the fact is we had no methods of disseminating our education, our learning, as far and as wide as we have today. That leads, of course, to why wouldn't we make use of these tools to better serve our clients, our customer, our students, etc.? Why wouldn't you? I often use that phrase a lot too when I'm talking to people. If you could have your own television show, why wouldn't you? If you could have your own radio show, why wouldn't you? The fact is these tools are there. You can now do things that were just unimaginable just 10 to 20 years ago. It used to be you had to have expensive licenses, big transmitters. You had to, the joke is the power of the press belongs to those who own one. Well, now everyone can own a printing press. I have some clients who actually, not clients, but actually more students of mine, who actually go to the library, the local library, and use the internet from a library computer and still do dramatic things. It's also important to remember when we look back on the technology of the past that older doesn't necessarily mean better. I run into that a lot here in Los Angeles because we are here in the hub of the entertainment industry, the television, the movie, the recording industry. And sometimes people tend to cast back a very, trying to think of the word, can't think of the word off the top of my head. They look back with rose-colored glasses on the past and say, oh, it was so much better when. It was so much better when. And sometimes they even carry that forward to the point of, well, all shows, new media or regular broadcast shows should be 30 minutes or an hour. They should be this type of show or that type of show. The fact is, they're falling into a common fallacy about new media in general. Nostalgia. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, my wife isn't here to carry those words along with me, so I'll allow Karen to carry my words. So nostalgia is exactly what I was talking about. It's important that we don't mistake the limitations of the past as being better. 30-minute show, an hour show, is not necessarily better way of doing things. The fact is, that was a limitation imposed by the technology. When you only had so many minutes of the day that you could actually broadcast your signal, you had to divide it into some easily divisible increments. Well, that's how we ended up with our initially 15, 30, 60-minute shows. Nowadays, we have shows that are longer, TV movies, we have shows that are a little bit shorter, but the fact is, people still think in that mindset. Now, conversely, though, new tools aren't necessarily better, okay? I often run into a lot of pushback of, well, that quality of that video on YouTube is horrible. It's pixelated, it's small, although nowadays with the HD uploads and stuff like that, it's actually getting much, much better. But you'll often get pushback in that regard. It doesn't live up to the mainstream media quality standards. The fact is, I'm sure television, if you've looked at the kinescopes from early television, it wasn't that good. Remember, we're still in just our 5th to 6th year of really having these new media tools available to us. And we can't expect a fully mature industry yet. The most important thing that you need to remember, though, is all these tools deserve to be investigated. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, about how and why you go about this, but the fact is, we need to constantly be watching for what tools are coming out, because there are dramatic tools like YouTube when it came out, like Twitter when it suddenly appeared, where suddenly gain a prominence. And the fact is, if we know about them early, we can start to take advantage of them earlier and actually get those benefits as early as possible. And not everything is going to work. And this is another thing that I'm constantly reminding people. Oh, well, that was horrible, and Buzz was horrible, and Google Wave, didn't do anything for us, and all these things. That's okay. Not everything is going to be useful to you. Not everything is going to be useful to your students, your clients, and so forth. Still need to investigate them, because the fact is, you don't really know what's going to be useful. Twitter is an example for me. Nowadays, pretty much the focal point of my outward-facing social media that I do is via Twitter. And then Twitter is used to update my Facebook and my blog and other places like that. When I first investigated Twitter, I had no idea that it was going to be as important as it has become. In fact, when I first tried, I said, wow, 140 characters? But, and I really kind of mulled it over. It was only when I started using it that I understood its power. Only when I engaged in the environment, engaged in the community, I went, oh, bing, the light goes on, the bell goes off. And you realize, for me, personally, this is a tool that I can work with. You're going to have different tools that work best for you. You're going to have tools that you make tremendous use out of. You're going to have some that just fade away because you can't find a way to fit them into your workflow. For me, one of those tools is Evernote. You may have heard of Evernote. It's an iPhone app. It's a website. It's also a desktop application. Great information manager, knowledge management system. I have yet to figure out a way to integrate it into my work. And that's okay. I know that. I use it here and there, but I know some people who live and die inside that application. I haven't found a way to fit it into my life just yet. Christopher has a question. But if we have limited resources, especially time, how do you decide what to invest in without giving the tools time to evolve a little? Well, the fact is, evolve is a great term because the tools evolve from day to day. My trick, people often, if you look at my website, you'll find that I do a lot, and it's a very broad avenue of stuff that I focus on. Call it a focus at all. They often ask me, how do you do all that you do? Because it looks like I'm doing a lot, and in fact, I am doing a lot. The most important fact for what I'm doing, Christopher, is it's integrated into my life and my work. Checking out new media tools is not something I have to set aside an hour or 2 hours a week to do, to consciously sit down and focus on it and do it. It's something that just rolls through my life, like the newspaper, like my Twitter feed, like my phone calls. What happens is I have put in my mind I don't want to call it a filter, but I notice, I have taken the time and I've made the effort to notice when new stuff appears. Just as I go through my day, whether I'm reading the newspaper or reading my RSS feeds or whatever, I just simply integrate it into my life. It isn't something I have to separate out and do separately. I notice when there's a newspaper article in the business section on Twitter or some new tool. I notice when there's photos coming through my feed using a new service. I try to take the option whenever I can to also collect new media, collect content as it enters my life, so that I'm not feeling like I'm doing more work. What I'm really doing is I'm just paying more attention to the things that come through my life on a daily basis and kind of shuffling them off into their little pigeonholes so I have a way to access them later, or I check them out very quickly when I have time. For all of those of you familiar with David Allen's Getting Things Done, one of the things I talk about is basically going through your inbox and putting everything on a proper list. Well, mentally, that's sort of what I do. Everything has a place to be stored. If I find something interesting in my RSS feeds, I have a way of sharing it that automatically saves it for me and also shares it to my followers on Twitter and Facebook and others. That's something that just because of the way that system works, I click one button and it's done. It's not something I have to spend a lot of time doing or a lot of time thinking about. It's just part of the way I go through my work. So Christopher, I think if you can find ways of integrating it in and using the tools, trying out the tools. I mean, when I try out a new media tool, like a new website or something, I'll maybe spend 5 to 10 minutes. I'll sign up, I'll check it out, I'll post a thing just to see how it works, and then I move on. And then I know I have this tool in my toolbox that if I run into a situation where I can think, oh, that tool might be useful, well, I can reach in my toolbox and pull that tool back out. And finally, as is true in all things, if you aren't moving forward, you're actually falling behind. And that's especially true in the new media world and in the online world in general. Innovation in computers themselves, the hardware boxes, has slowed down over the years. Back when I was working for Walt Disney Imagineering in the early 90s, we literally had the situation of computers being obsolete the minute we opened the box. That was in the days of the old 286, 386, 486 realm. Nowadays, that forward movement has slowed down quite a bit. Now a computer will last a good year or so before it really even has any inclination of being obsolete. What's happened, though, is the speed of innovation in the online and the new media world, the social media world, is blisteringly fast. New services come and go. They rise and they fall every single day. I'm noticing a lot in my reading recently that we're seeing a lot of services that were created over the last several months starting to fall off due to the economy, and basically they just never got an audience. That is just something you have to deal with. And again, by hopefully integrating this watching of this new media into your life, you have a way to kind of filter through these things, check them out, put them aside, so that if you do have a use for them, they're there. But if they don't grow into something big like Twitter, you didn't spend a lot of time or money on them. Inertia. Anyone out there a physics student? I'm not a big physics person. I'm a science geek, but as far as physics, I sort of got through it in high school. That was about it. But inertia is something I deeply understand, and I think we all do intuitively because we deal with it every single day. With most of my clients, most of the people I work with, this is the single most troublesome factor in getting them to use. They are a big rock sitting at the top of a very large hill. And as you know, with inertia, things that are at rest like to remain at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. Well, I try to be that outside force. I have found that if I can get the rock moving even just a little bit, it will start to go under its own power. It's a lot of what I do, much like this forum that I'm presenting today, is nudging that boulder, pushing it just a little bit, getting people going. Because what I find is if I can get people moving, they begin to understand the power of new media, start using it in their own work. A part of inertia is one of the big arguments that people throw up is, well, do I do this or that, this or that, this or that? And the fact is, I don't think the world's ever really been a series of either or decisions, but we like to think it is sometimes. The new media world, either or is out the window. Either or doesn't exist. I've adopted instead yes and. It's not about either or. It's about yes and. It's about seeing those new tools that are being announced, these new websites, the new software, the new iPhone apps that are coming through your life and saying, okay, that's interesting. Spending 5 to 10 minutes checking them out, storing them away for future use, maybe start using them immediately. You're still going to do most of everything you've done in the past. Things roll out of your toolbox more slowly than things come in. And yes, that can lead to a somewhat complicated and cluttered toolbox, but the fact is that's the way life works. Radio has not disappeared. Television has not disappeared. Newspapers have not disappeared, although we may be on the verge of that, at least in their current form. You're still going to continue using those tools which still work, but you're going to say yes and to some of these new tools that are rolling in. You can't ignore the world. You can't go live in the cave, as much as I would like to do it sometimes. You can't go live in the cave on the mountain and be a hermit in the type of work that we do. Our role is to teach and assist and support other people. That means we have to be out there constantly investigating the new stuff that's available, putting it to use where possible, and finally rolling out the old stuff that is no longer useful to us. I can almost guarantee that there's no one out there today still using film strips. Film strips were the height of innovation, the height of technology when I was in elementary and high school. And frankly, a lot of them were really well done. I used to actually like film strips. I thought the wonderful photography in most of them and the interesting information, the National Geographic ones always intrigued me. But the fact is, we have much better technology today for delivering that type of information. So film strips, you're not going to see used very much anymore. In fact, they've almost become a nostalgia item in themselves they're being put online as slideshows to give people an idea of what the state of the art was back then. So certain things are going to roll off, and that's okay. The point is, you still use the tools that are most effective. If that tool for opening paint cans is still the most effective tool to use, you're going to use it. But when something newer comes along, you're going to try it out and go, you know what? That tool I can finally retire. That tool I can get rid of in preference for this new tool. You need to be constantly investigating. Probably 10, 20, 100, 200 new services, new websites, new apps, new software being created every single day. And that's a lot. It really is. And I mentioned earlier, one of the ways I deal with that complexity, that flow of data, that river of data, is I'm an avid reader of RSS feeds. Subscribe to websites, the Google Reader in my case, which if you haven't tried it out, I highly recommend it as a way of managing your information flow and consumption. Find it at reader.google.com. Instead of reading print magazines, instead of reading newspapers, a lot of newspapers, instead of visiting websites one by one, I let Google Reader bring the information to me where I can sit either with my iPhone, my Macintosh, on another computer, wherever I am, and quickly flip through my reading for the day. Again, marking those things that interest me to go back for further review later, sharing those items with others, all very, very quick, very, very efficient. I can monitor 4, 5, 600 websites easily with Google Reader and glean the most current and the most interesting information out of that river, if you will, want to continue using that metaphor. Pull the fish out of the river very, very quickly and very, very efficiently so that I can then put it to use, which is what I recommend you do as well. Again, it's hard to recognize the value of something unless you actually go to use it. I get a lot of this. People will say they don't use Facebook and say, what good is Facebook? And it's like, well, you know what? You got to get an account. We got to get you 5 or 6 friends in there, and we got to get your page set up. Then you can make a judgment about, is it useful for me or not? I'm not a believer that you can look out from the outside of new media. You can look at new services. You can look at new software and say, oh, that's not for me, or that is for me, until you actually, because you don't understand it. You don't really know what goes on in there until you dive in. My wife uses computers a lot. She uses technology. She is an adjunct professor out here in the Southern California area. She is not a technophile. She is not a tech geek. This is something we laugh about all the time. I am a fairly geeky person. She uses it as a tool. She had not been on any social media sites until finally I set up a Facebook account for her and I added a few of our mutual friends. I said, you should add Roseanne. Because I knew if I could get her started with a comfortable group of people she already knew, she would see the value in doing it. But it wasn't until I set her on the path that she got it, that she understood it. Now, she uses it, again, not a lot. None of us play the Farmville games or anything like that, but she really uses it to keep in touch with people that she wants to stay in touch with, people that she perhaps had fallen out of touch with, at least in a small fashion, that she really wanted to remain in touch with. But where she would write letters to them, paper letters to them, she would never get paper letters back. Well, guess what? It's so much easier for them to reply on Facebook and to have conversations on Facebook than it ever was using paper. And so those more reticent people, those people who just aren't letter writers, suddenly have a way that they can stay in contact with a group of people. And in fact, we actually reconnected with a whole group of people that had fallen out of contact with her for the wrong reason. They had thought something of her wrongly that they now realize, 20, 30 years later, wasn't the case. And so now that conversation continues at a much higher level with her. But again, she didn't know it until she dove into it. We talked about the toolbox metaphor, storing that tool away in the toolbox. That tool might not fit today. It might not be useful for you today, but it could be tomorrow. It could be the day after. It could be when there's a leap in some other technology. Live streaming really wasn't that useful in the early days. It was prone to breakup and audio glitches and other things. Nowadays, I can stream from my iPhone pretty reliably as long as I have a fairly stable internet connection. I've actually streamed entire benefit concerts that I've done for people from my iPhone. It's at a state now where it can be really, really useful, much like we're experiencing today, even though we're only using audio. That was a case where the technology had to catch up. There's a phrase, it's not so much that the bear dances well, it's that the bear dances at all. Well, you check things out, and sometimes it's just the bear dancing, okay? And you have to wait for it to dance well. But because you have the knowledge of that tool, because you know that it is possible at its most basic level, you can keep it in your toolbox so that when the technology improves a little bit, you can start to integrate it more and more into your life. Audience. Again, out here in LA, the hub of the entertainment industry, the mainstream industry likes to believe they know exactly who their audience is. This sitcom is designed for males between the ages of 18 and 35, which is the most coveted demographic. And it's going to return this many viewers every week. And you know what? It's all just a big shell game. The Nielsen ratings are estimated and fussed in such a dramatic number of ways that to an outsider like myself, they're basically meaningless. It's a way for them to try and keep score, but it's fudged in so many ways that it really isn't reliable. The fact is, mainstream media and we ourselves have no idea who our audience is. We might say, well, this course is for incoming freshmen who didn't get their 3 languages from high school and are doing, have to catch up, or they're remedial in English or whatever. And that's okay. We can kind of make some assumptions about what the audience is for our work. The truth is we don't really know, because you don't know that the 45-year-old continuing education student who's taking an online course from your school finds that much more useful than the freshman coming in for whatever reason. I own a Honda Element vehicle. Bought one of the first model years of that vehicle, and I remember having a discussion with the salesperson when we went in and said, "Well, this vehicle, if you've seen the ads, it's all designed for hip 20-year-olds who want to go out and skiing and hiking and you know who's buying it? 60-year-olds." I was, I think, 40 at the time when I bought it. They thought they were producing a vehicle for one audience, but because of the various options, the swinging doors, the low step into the vehicle, the fact that it seated 4 but also could carry lots of cargo, actually appealed to an older demographic. And they didn't know that until they actually started to sell the items. Again, it comes back to that familiar refrain with me was, we just don't know sometimes. Have to try things out. And so, with your new media projects, you can have kind of an idea in your mind what your audience is. But I can guarantee you, you will always be surprised. You will always have those 60-year-old Element owners showing up who find what you're making very, very useful. And you shouldn't ignore them. You shouldn't look at that and say, well, that's outside of our demographic. You should look at that and say, wow, that's a whole new group of people that I'm helping, that I'm educating, that I'm teaching, that I never thought I was going to reach with this product. And that's okay. Because what you'll find is anything that increases your audience, at least I believe, anything that increases your audience is a good thing. Anything that increases learning is a good thing. Anything that helps your students learn more, regardless of who they are, is worthwhile. So remember that about your audience. It's okay to have an audience, but can't always guarantee exactly who that audience is going to be. So, kind of as an add-on to that, how are learners best served by new media? For years now, we've had the concept of learning styles. And I know there's some new research that's kind of, questioning that layout a little bit, basically your auditory, your visual, your kinesthetic learners and stuff like that. But the fact is, we've had a concept that there are different types of learning styles out there. I think new media is one of the biggest changes we have available to us, one of the biggest tools we have available to us to address these learning styles, whatever they may be. I think in some cases we have many more variable divisions of those learning styles than perhaps the initial 3 or 4 that they laid out. New media allows us to reach audiences, to convey information to people who might have been underserved in the past, people who might have had trouble gaining information in certain ways. One of the first things that new media brings to us is choice and flexibility, both to us and to our students. We have a choice of what we create, how we create it, how we deliver it. The students have a choice of how to consume that material, when to consume that material, and where to consume that material. I think that is a great change in our environment. Yes, books have always been able to basically be able to be taken with us, and that's a great concept. But now we can also take media with us. We can take audio with us. We can take video with us. We can take slideshows and PowerPoint presentations and everything else with us wherever we feel most comfortable consuming it. One of the things I say about podcasting all the time, it's what you want, where you want it, when you want it. And that is its true power, is that ability to be available when you need it, when you are most available. I'm not a morning person. I know there are lots of people out there a morning person. My wife is a morning person. My son, thank goodness, got that from her, and so they're up at 6:30 every morning, or I tend to sleep until 8, 9 o'clock because I've been up late the night before. Obviously, forcing me to consume, in my case, when I was in college, a geology class at 8 a.m. 2 days a week probably wasn't the best choice for me. I was simply not open to gaining that information at that time of day. I actually am a science geek. I actually like the course, but the fact is, physically, I was not ready to learn at 8 a.m. Other people might be ready to learn at 8 a.m. They might be ready to learn at 3 a.m., 3 p.m. In fact, my courses at 3 p.m. is when I have my downtime during that. That's when I start to drag. I was a guy in the break room making a new pot of coffee every day when I worked in an office. I would know that I need probably to consume learning and education for me later in the evening, after dinner sometime, when I can sit and be quiet, the rest of the family has gone to bed. That's when I like to read. That's when I like to consume media. That's when I like to learn new things. New media gives everyone now, pretty much, the ability to consume that material when it's best for them. Also, because all this media can now be archived easily online. Yes, you could get a book from the library. Yes, you could go to the library to read a book, or you could read a magazine, whatever. Now, because of that portability of media, I can sit down at 11 o'clock at night and review something that I need to review, knowing it's always going to be available to me. It's always out there in the website. I don't have to make special arrangements to go and watch a video, or, which I had to do in college. There was often times when I had to go to the AV room in the library to watch a particular video. I don't have to do that anymore. Again, I can do it when it best suits me. New media is also adaptable to new learning styles as we discover them, as they come about. So, again, as I said with new media itself, we don't know what's coming down the pike. We don't know necessarily what new media tools are going to be invented. We don't know what we're going to discover about learning styles, about education, about learning in general down the road. But because of the flexibility of new media, we have the ability to adapt the tools and our products to whatever learning styles we discover. One of the biggest pushbacks I get from professors, teachers, presenters of information is, well, if I deliver a podcast of my class, the kids won't come to class. To which I can say, anecdotal information has shown that not to be the case. People, for the most part, still like to learn in a collaborative and in a combined environment. It's part of the experience of being in class, as opposed to the experience, for example, same reason you go to a movie theater rather than watch something at home. Movie theaters still exist. There's still some desire there for people to go out and have a communal entertainment experience. I think the same thing also goes for schooling. When there's still a communal experience that happens when you're at college, that I think most of the people probably still engage in. To that, though, I also say, if students get more from your lecture, if they divine more of the information, if they retain more of the information of your lecture, listening to it as they pedal across campus, walk across campus, sit under a tree on campus, shouldn't we provide that opportunity? Again, going back to the learning styles. If someone learns in a different way, to us, we should be able to adapt to that. As educators, we need to be able to adapt to that and say, okay, you really need this information, but I'm going to figure out a way to get that information to you in a way that best suits you. Maggie and Chris in the chat says, if they make the classes interactive instead of just lectures, the students will come. I agree to that to some point. We've all experienced the lecture hall experience where the professor walks in with a stack of 3x5 cards and drones on for an hour and walks back out. As we know, that's not the best way of transmitting information. Classes that include demonstrations, discussions, arguments, video, audio, all the different tools we have, engage students more in the educational process, whether they're presented in person or in new media online. I think that's a general thing we all need to learn, is that we can present education better. I personally think the new media gives us some of those tools that help us do that as well. Your goal, all of our goal as educators, is to convey the information, not fill seats in a classroom. That's antithetical to everything we have thought about education for the last 100 years or more. But the fact is, that's one of the things that new media is changing for us. If we can gather that information in a way that better suits us, let's do it. If we can provide that information in a way that better suits our students, let's do it. Let's not worry about filling seats in the 300-seat lecture hall, which I never really considered a great idea. Anyway, let's focus on what our true goal is supposed to be, and that's educating those people who come to us to learn something. The other thing about lectures, too, and granted, even a bad lecture delivered via new media is just as bad or even worse than a lecture delivered in person, except perhaps with your iPod you can speed play a less involved lecture and get through it more quickly while still getting the information that's there. It really doesn't require a lot of resources to capture a lecture, to capture a professor, to capture content that's used in the course. And so we can't even really look back on it and go, oh, this is too much work. It's, I have to do this, I have to do that. It's like, well, no, I'm not going to let you get away with that, because the fact is, again, going back to what I said earlier, if you're integrating this into your life, if you're integrating this into your work, if you're integrating this into your system, it becomes very, very easy to capture the content that's being created and allow people to consume it in whatever way meets their needs. John Patterson in the chat says, the best instructors cater to multiple learning styles. Generally, I avoid doing one thing for more than 50 minutes. I use lecture, collaboration, video, and other learning strategies together. And John, that is exactly what you should be doing, in my humble opinion. I know that when I took courses in a college environment, those were the courses I got the most out of, is those courses that sought to engage me in the educational process rather than just spew data at me. I took two courses on the Civil War, basically pre-Civil War to end of the war, and then end of the war to Reconstruction. Amazing information. I'm a history buff as well, so it was just amazing to me, that information. Unfortunately, it was presented in a way that was a tough slog. And what I would often find myself doing is finding other information, other ways that same information was presented, because it did interest me enough, that would then, of course, help me in the course, because it could put some flesh on the bones I had gotten in the class and allow me to pursue an interest that I had more deeply, even if that wasn't being presented in class. And I think the best students do that. The best students go beyond what's being presented in the classroom. But shouldn't we be helping them to engage in that educational process? Maggie says in the chat, our education system has been mostly about schooling, and unfortunately, I have to agree with that. I am not as vociferous a critic as some people that you might be reading today. Sitting right here next to my computer is a copy of Lynchman by Seth Godin, and he is taking the educational system to task. Not because it didn't fulfill the needs of the time, but because we're being so reluctant to let go of a system that was created for another time, I think. I personally don't think that the educational system treated me badly over the years. But then again, I really have not had any diagnosed learning disability like that. And I know there were students in my class that did have issues with that. So I, again, look to new media to say there are different ways of doing this. There are better ways of doing this, I think, and tools to kind of if you will, evolve our educational system into what's necessary for the 21st century and beyond. Christopher in the chat says it's based on an assembly line, not a creative, innovative society. That is exactly what Seth Godin is saying in his book. We now require creative, innovative people, but yet our educational systems, to a large degree, is still focused on turning out factory workers. Fact is, 50, 60 years ago, factory workers are what we needed. But as we've seen with the current economic crisis, we have different needs. We have different goals in our educational system today. And again, I will say I've taken the blue pill, I guess, as a major. I have seen what we need to do with new media, and that is why I spend a lot of my time talking about it, like today. New media also brings us an interesting benefit that I first noticed when I started podcasting. I've been writing a career column, my career opportunities column, for about 8 or 9 years when podcasting was invented, the term was coined or whatever. Soon after that, I realized that I was having a more intimate conversation with my listeners than perhaps I was having with my readers. Now, sure, you can cry at the end of Harry Potter. Books carry a lot of emotion and a lot of intimacy with them. I think new media ramps that up to an amazingly high level beyond what even a book can deliver. After doing an audio podcast for a while, when I started to talk about it with others, I would tell them to imagine, much like the picture here, imagine all your students walking around with earbuds in their ears like they do these days, like we all do these days. When you're doing a podcast, you are literally whispering in their ears. Literally. Sometimes you're screaming in their ears, but you're actually whispering right in it. How intimate is that? How intimate is it in real life to have someone lean in and whisper or speak something softly directly into your ear? That's intimate. That's being upfront. Now imagine the whole concept of video on top of that. Not only are you whispering in their ears, you're looking them in the eyes. You may be thousands of miles away physically, but you're looking them in the eyes. And hopefully, if you're getting some feedback or comments back or video comments back, you're looking in their eyes, they're looking in your eyes, and you're looking in their eyes as well. How much more intimate is that than even audio? John had a question in the chat about the author of the book Lynchpin. It's by author Seth Godin, Godin. He has a large collection of business books. I really like his books. They always make me think, and so I tend to pick up the new ones whenever they're available. There's actually a link in the chat room there if you didn't notice. Thank you, Lita, for putting that there. I am in a situation where I'm standing right now where I can't really type very well, so that makes it easy for me. New media also brings e-learning, like we're doing today, closer to classroom interactivity. Kind of a Freudian slip there when I said inactivity. As someone in the chat, I think Christopher maybe in the chat was saying, John was saying about engaging the students. New media allows you to do that. Sure, they may be consuming the podcast by themselves, but with a combination of chat rooms like we have today, discussion groups, and other methods of giving you feedback and having a back and forth discussion, you really start to take some of the best elements of classroom learning, that interactivity, that discussion, that wrestling with the information and the knowledge that I think really benefits education in general, bringing more and more of that into the online environment by using these new media. My wife and I teach podcasting and new media for writers for UCLA Extension, and we've done it in 2 different ways. One way is we do a 10-week online course based totally with text-based discussion groups, and on one occasion we've actually done it as a 1-day workshop. The fact is, while a lot of the information being presented during the day or during the 10-week class is very much the same, I use a lot of the same examples and other stuff, the feeling of those classes is quite different. What we find is in the 10-week course, simply because you have much more time, even though you're basically dealing with text-based discussion groups, the conversations we have with people during that 10-week course, even again, just typing messages back and forth, is so much deeper and so much more involved than what we can get possibly in a one-day workshop, or even in a series of 1-hour traditional classroom sessions. Several reasons for that. One of the reasons is, of course, people in a face-to-face environment, certain people just aren't as comfortable talking about the education, the learning in the classroom. You always have the people who are most outgoing, and you always have the few that sit in the back or sit in the middle of the classroom more likely and kind of listen to everything but don't really discuss anything in the course. We found with the online courses, it's actually easier to bring those reluctant people out, to get the comments and the oftentimes great understanding that they have of the topic out for the rest of the course that we'd never be able to do in a traditional classroom setting. Again, this is one of the reasons I like teaching online courses. This is one of the reasons I like having a chat room here. Is I like that interaction. I think that's one of the best parts about education for both the student and the instructor. So anything that new media can do to invigorate that and to bring that into the online is a great way. It just deepens further the intimacy we already have from earbuds or our private videos. Christopher asked in the chat, don't you really have to have a specific purpose for talking heads since audio only takes up less bandwidth space, etc.? You know what, Christopher? Yes. For example, today, we're using audio only today. I could very well have a little video window up here, but you'd be seeing me talking to you. And as long as my presentation is useful, yeah, you really don't need to see me, except if you want to ramp up. If you really want to connect with people, yes, even having that talking head in the little box in the corner is useful, because at least you start to get the sense that I'm looking you in the eye. The other thing you're not getting with just this audio only, you're not seeing my gestures, you're not seeing my facial expressions. We as humans convey so much information, gestures, our expressions, our tone of voice. If you don't see someone, like you can't see me today, you're actually missing out on a lot of subtle cues that might be useful to you, that might help you retain the information, that if nothing else would really let you know what I consider most important and less important. Because the fact is, when we're presenting something we consider important, our gestures are forceful, our face shows it. You may not even consciously understand this, but there is definitely a benefit to just having a topic, I'm reading the chat room at the same time, to having just a talking head in the corner. There is something to be gained there. And the fact is, with heavy compression and other things we can do today, and the fact that we have higher bandwidth connections to the internet and various things like that, it's less of an issue. Yes, in the past, moving video around was a hard slog. Today, it is so much easier, and it's only going to get easier in the past. And if you're talking about a podcast, that's something people can carry around on their own personal player. They don't even need to be connected to the internet to view it, which again, I think is a great benefit of podcasting in general. Bandwidth issues, I think it's fair to say bandwidth issues will become less and less of an issue as we go on, to the point of getting to the level of where it's probably not going to be an issue at all eventually. We'll be able to demonstrate 3D and hologram style 3D and whatever we want to do. The bandwidth will be there. Now, selling new media. Oh boy. As you all know, this is the tough part. It can be very tough to convince traditionally focused educational people on new media. I describe this as the "hey you kids, get off my lawn" syndrome. I work very, very hard to try and prevent that syndrome. I attend events that are populated mainly by younger people than myself. I read materials that I am probably not the focus audience for, and I do that on purpose because I don't want to be the person at 46, which I am right now, saying, "Hey, you kids, get off my lawn." And the fact is, we deal with that every day. We meet people like that every day. It can happen for a variety of reasons. It can happen because of fear. It can happen because they're tired. It can happen because they're burned out. Regardless, it happens. We get to a point in our lives where we stop wanting to have innovations. We're kind of done with that. I'm happy with what I got right now, and I'm going to ride that out for the rest of my career. Unfortunately, those are often the people we're trying to sell on new media. And as Christopher says in the chat, we're trying to get all the boomers to retire here. You know, it's very, I state this as gently as possible, but sometimes attrition is the only way to move. It is through people retiring and moving out of the environment that we're able to actually bring in some of these changes. And hopefully, we who are bringing in these changes today will not turn into those curmudgeons who prevented us from doing what we want to do, but rather help facilitate whatever new technologies, whatever new learning, whatever new education comes in the future. We need to remember that. Again, don't become someone who's telling kids to get off their lawn, okay? The best way is dealing with people like this. Again, dealing with that inertia that we talked about earlier. I find that short, small trials are best. And I realize as I'm rewriting as I'm giving the presentation, but do it under the radar. Quick, short trials, under the radar. Do it as cheaply as you can, free if possible, using free tools, whatever. Because it allows you then to go to the powers that be as somewhat of a fait accompli and say, look, we did this cool thing, and this is the results, and here's what people thought about it. You're basically gathering your ammunition before you're going to battle. Going to battle with something of, hey, this is a great idea, and I'm totally sold on this, and it's going to be the next best thing since sliced bread, that's fine. You believe it, you've absorbed it, you've accepted, you've investigated it. These people have not. You are truly selling ice cubes to Eskimos, if you will, in that case, because they have their inertia set to 100%. And using the traditional arguments of this is better because, and talking to them about it, probably isn't going to be that successful. Just like I said to you about you have to go out and try these tools and see which ones work. You've got to go out and try these new tools, develop these small trials, develop the success stories that you can then bring back and go, look, we used this in the real world and it worked. And it was a benefit to both us and our students. I would like to do more of this. You're simply helping to lead your management forward gently into the new world by showing them the benefits directly. Because that's something that always comes up. There was a mention earlier in the chat about the cost involved, and so there's going to be a cost-benefit analysis done here. If you can gather your benefits before you have to start talking about the cost, you're ahead of the game. You've already given yourself a big step forward into helping to gently bring these people forward with you. The other thing to do there too is do it gently. That's why I said again, short, small trials. A little here, a little there. You're not going to try to revamp your entire curriculum in one semester. You're going to pick your battles. You're going to pick those areas that are most ripe for success and use those as your test cases and start to demonstrate what these new media tools can do for everyone involved. You're going to take every opportunity to try something out. I don't care how small. Something as simple as recording a read of a particular story or document that you also add to the class, and then questioning the students about, was that helpful to you? Was it useful to you? Where did you listen to this? It's something where you start to build up your ammunition through successes like that you can then use to do bigger things down the road. Christopher says in the chat, John says in the chat, selling is very important for the IT leaders. It's in my own organization. We fail to move new ideas forward because they're not framed properly. Having been in IT, having lived on both sides of that IT table, I know how difficult it can be. As an IT person, you can be very reticent because unfortunately, everything you bring to the IT person is seen as more work for them. And that can be a really hard hurdle to get over. You need to find ways to partner with the IT department. The IT department needs to have a success as much as you do. And they need to be seen as being successful in a particular pilot program as much as you do. So anything you can do to partner with IT, to say, hey, this is going to look good for both of us, and it's not going to be that much more work, that'll really help you when you're framing these new projects. And again, starting small, starting quick, starting small successes and moving forward helps with that as well. One of the ways you can promote new media too is use the tools internally first. Start to use them within your own department. Start to use them to convey information amongst your own staff. That one gives you practice at using the tools, so you kind of get down how they work and how you can use them. And again, it's a little success story that has nothing to do with the students. You don't have to worry about anyone coming back to you and saying, well, you're changing the curriculum and the professors don't like it because of it. And it's like, no. You're just doing it inside your department. The fact is, the more comfortable you become within your own department, the more comfortable it'll be for these people to start rolling it out to outward-facing educational tasks. So, if you're not using it yourself, the term at Microsoft, of course, you eat your own dog food. If you really believe that new media is useful, you've got to start using it yourself as a way of selling it to the outside world. You sell new media by using new media. A phrase I come back to again and again. I really do believe that. Think small. Not everything has to be huge, expensive effort. Here again in Hollywood, the joke is every movie needs to be 15 million or higher. Every movie takes that. And well, the fact is, does that entire 15 million show up on the screen? No. Most of it was spent on catering, if you will. So don't think that you have to restructure everything at the same time. You have to completely turn the world upside down. One, it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult and very likely to fail. And two, it's going to burn you out. There's the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. And, that's what you're going to do with new media. You're going to eat that curriculum and that change elephant one bite at a time. Even Hollywood's learning that lesson. We saw tremendous success with Blair Witch and other things that would cost a fraction of $15 million, below $1 million basically, and returned $80 million. The profit on that movie was just outrageous. And we're starting to see it with web shows out here now in mainstream media. And you can kind of learn from those lessons. Not everything takes $15 million. One of the ways of doing that too is, again, talking back about integrating into your work and your life. A lot of times we throw away content. We'll have a particularly compelling SME come into our offices just for a meeting or to say hi or whatever. They're on a visit. If we only made an attempt to grab some of their content, to do a short interview with them, do a short audio interview with them, collect the content that goes walking by our door every day, our job gets easier. Then it's not something we have to go out and set aside a time. We're going to set an hour. This lecture is going to be in, Hughes Hall 115 at 1 o'clock today, and we got to get a crew out there to record it. And think about how you can collect content as it walks by your door. If you think that way, I can almost guarantee you're going to start collecting content. Because the fact is, lots of content walks by our door every single day, and we just let it walk on by. We have special guests on campus we don't approach with a portable recorder and get a few minutes with them. I got an interview with Nolan Bushnell one night, a founder of Atari and a restaurant channel here called U-Ink and Chuck E. Cheese and all this stuff, just because I happened to be at a meeting of some tech geeks at his new restaurant. And after he welcomed us to the restaurant, I walked up and said, hey, would you mind if I got a short interview with you? I have my portable recorder with me. We sat down at the bar, and while he was waiting for his dinner to arrive from the kitchen, I got about a 15 to 20 minute interview with him. Okay, that's not something that a lot of people can get. Had I called up and said, hi, Nolan, I'd like to get an interview with you and I'd like to set aside an hour, it's like, I probably would have never gotten it. One, it had just been too much work. But the fact is, by being prepared and ready, wherever you go, you can collect and create content that otherwise would just walk on by. So if there's anything I can say on the content creation side today, that's it. Capture everything that comes your way. You will be much the better for it, and you'll start to have great content you can deliver to people. Looking at the chat room here again real quick, Maggie Smart says, I was able to whip up my iPhone 4 and video a great demonstration and then put it in one of my courses. Slick. Exactly. Maggie, that is exactly what I'm telling people. I've been carrying a flip cam in my purse. Yes, I carry a purse because I have so much tech geek stuff that I wouldn't really, and no, it's not a man bag, it's a purse. I recently got the iPhone 4. With the improved camera, the HD video, it's becoming my main content gathering tool these days. And the main reason for that is it is ubiquitous. It's always in my pocket, it's always in my purse, it's always in my hand, it's always nearby, and I can pull it out whenever I need. One of the first poll questions we talked about, and yes, Karen, I see your message, and yes, we'll start to wrap it up here. It's actually easy to gain new media knowledge without a lot of cost. The fact is, informal learning is always the best. Trying something out, signing up for a new service and using it for a few minutes. You can also look online for examples. The fact is, there are tremendous resources out there. If you do a search on how to edit using Final Cut Pro, you'll be buried in the number of videos and demonstrations and textual demonstrations out there. It's just quite amazing. It just literally just by going here, how to edit videos. Boom. What do you want to know? It's available. That's the great power of the internet, is we now have at our fingertips a tremendous amount of information. Make use of that. I still see people these days that will say, well, I can't do that because I don't know how to do that. And it's like, have you done a Google search? That's where I go. I've been doing this for years, and that's still the first place I go when I have a problem or I want to learn something. I do a Google search, and I see what it turns up, and then I follow the path and see where it leads me. Anybody can do that, and everyone should be doing that. You can get pro results on an amateur budget, as we've been talking about. The iPhones, the flip cams, the Audacity audio recording software, the iLive suite from Apple, iMovie, down, dirty, quick. Get your videos together, edit them, title them, get them out. There's even a upload directly to YouTube button right in the program. It can't possibly get easier. And it's scary because it actually will get easier. But right now you're like, God, this is so easy. How can they make it easier? It will, and we'll be amazed even more down the road. One last poll here. Wanted to say, what new tools have you tried recently? Because, of course, that's been my whole thing today is, what new tools have you tried out? Because I want to see what's interesting you. And then I also want to say, if you see something here that you don't recognize, check it out. Take a look at it. These are some of the tools that I use and that I recommend. If you're not investigating them, I highly recommend that you do, because there's something very interesting going on there. I'll notice at the bottom that no one's talking about the Zoom or the dimdim.com. Dimdim.com is a fully integrated, much like the environment we're using today, presentation environment with audio, video, whiteboarding, and everything else. It's free. Okay? Again, cheap, quick. Give it a look. Try it out. iJot. Yeah, I've been familiar with iJot, Christopher. Maggie says, I use iMovie a lot. And Lita said, I'm a master at Google Foo. And we should all be. We should all be masters of our Google Foo. That is for sure. So there's a poll. So a lot of people knowing about using Twitter these days, YouTube. YouTube's going, really a great way of getting into the whole video presentation. Wikis. I love wikis. I have trouble getting other people to use wikis with me. If you're having wiki success, I need to talk to you. RSS feeds is another powerful. Wrapping it up, I usually have a resource list that I put out as a PDF, but I realized that my resource list gets out of date the minute I make a PDF. So what I'm going to recommend to all of you, here is a link to my shared items tagged new media in my Google Reader. You can also follow me in Google Reader if you like and see all of my shared items. But if you're just interested in the new media stuff, you can actually follow that link. It'll take you to the shared items webpage, and there's also an RSS feed on that webpage that you can then subscribe to. And basically, from this point on, you'll see everything that I tag that I find interesting with the words new media. I also run a group called New Media Interchange at newmediainterchange.com. It's a blog and discussion groups. It's a group, free group dedicated to helping everyone make use of new media. Not just educators, not just entertainment people, but also your local hairdresser, restaurant, retailer, manufacturer, whatever. I believe new media can be used by everyone. It should be used by everyone to improve their life and their business. So definitely, if you're interested in further that, please check that out as well. Here's all the information about me personally. If you go to douglasewelch.com, you'll find links to everything that I do, and it is wide and varied, including gardening, technology, new media, podcasting, hiking, outdoors, and everything else. You can email me directly at me@douglasewelch.com. My new media blog is Careers in New Media, and again, New Media Interchange. Any further questions in the chat room, please go ahead and drop them in there, and Karen will let us know when our time is up. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Screencast-O-Matic. Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, there's a lot of screencasting tools out there. Camtasia probably be one of the more powerful ones. I actually use one on the Mac called, I think, iShowU, which does a really good job at recording both audio and the screen. There's actually some free tools now available via the web browser that actually will do screencasts directly in your web browser and then save them online for you that you can then embed in your own website. Again, getting that simple factor even lower and lower and lower as we go. You don't even need to install software on your computer to make use of those. Christopher says Screencast-O-Matic has some features even Camtasia doesn't. That's good. Now, the one feature I will say I love about Camtasia is the auto zoom. When you're giving a presentation, if you hover the mouse, the Camtasia will say, "Ooh, okay, he's focusing on that area," and actually will zoom in on that area. And that's one of my favorite features with Camtasia for sure. Jing is one of the, Lita says Jing is one of the online screen capture tools. Well, guys, I want to thank you so much for listening today. I hope it's been useful. I hope I've given you a little bit of the why after you got a lot of the how in these last 2 days. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me or contact me through New Media. I'd love to hear your questions. Your questions become fodder for the New Media Interchange blog and help other people, because if you have the question, well, I can guarantee you 10, 100, 1,000 other people have the same question. So it's always great to hear from people. I love talking about new media. I love doing new media. So please let me assist you in the way I can. At this point, I'm going to turn you back over to Karen. Thanks, Karen, for managing everything today, and we will talk to you all later.
This is Careers in New Media with Douglas E. Welch. For more information, visit the website douglasewelch.com/newmedia.